Hello to my online learners. Let's look at the lymphatic system. You may have heard the term lymph in terms of lymph nodes. You may have not have heard lymph at all, because to me, lymph is the unloved system. I do have, someone gave me a stuffy lymph node. Isn't that cute? It kind of looks like an alien until you know what a lymph node looks like. So when we get to lymph nodes, I'll pull them out again. This is lymphy, the lymph node. I think it was lymphy. What is it? He has this funny name. What is his name? I don't know. I'll have to look again. I know I had it written down. A student gave it to me. Isn't it cool? Yeah. Lymphy to lymph nodes. Good. So when we look at the lymphatic system, to me, the lymphatic system is the unloved system that you don't even know exists until things go wrong. So when we look at the lymphatic system is basically, it's a collection system that then filters and dumps it back into the blood. So the lymphatic system is full of lymph. Now, where does this lymph come from? Lymph vessels run right beside capillaries. So if the capillaries do not reabsorb all the fluid, okay, imagine this. So the fluid is in the artery, it gets into smaller and smaller, and then at the capillary end, the fluid washes over the cells, and in a perfect world, most of it goes back into the venous end of the capillary before it goes and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and into veins and ends back up in the heart, in the vena cava. Now, about 30% of your fluid does not get reabsorbed into your capillaries. Instead, it gets picked up by these lymph vessels, and the fluid inside it is called lymph. So really, lymphatic fluid or lymph is exactly the same as blood, minus the cells, minus most of the proteins. And because it's picking up anything that washes over the tissue, it can also contain bacteria, viruses, cancer, anything that's in a waste product on the tissue. Okay. So that is the lymph. Now, when we talk about the lymphatic system, there are organs involved. Lymph nodes are one of them. And you have lymph nodes along your neck, the majority of them. They're all over the body, but they're on your neck. So when you have, when you're sick and you have swollen glands, you actually have swollen nodes. Sorry, it doesn't sound as exciting. Then you have a large collection underneath your armpit and in your groin. That's where the majority are, but lymph nodes are all over the body. So lymph nodes is one of the organs we talk about. The spleen is another organ we talk about. The thymus. So we're going to talk about T cells later on when we talk about acquired immunity. The T cells go through the thymus for what they call an education. And then the bone marrow are the 4 organs associated with the lymph. Now there's also some lesser ones which include the tonsils, and then there's something called Pryor's patches in your gut, stuff like that. Okay, so lymph is your fluid. Now as we go through the worksheet, or the note sheet, I think I call it, here's a diagram that I took from another textbook, I think, because I don't like this textbook one. And here are the organs, and here are the components I want you to know. So we already talked about lymph, and lymph is the fluid. And as I mentioned, the fluid is collected in the lymphatic capillaries. So the red one's a blood capillary. As the tissue leaves the capillary and washes over, as the blood fluid, which would be the plasma, leaves the tissue capillaries and washes over the tissue, not all of it gets collected back into the capillary, so some goes into the lymphatic vessels. Okay, so you've got lymphatic capillaries, which are blind-ended, and they collect into lymphatic vessels, and then the lymphatic vessels will jump into, they actually go right back into your veins, in your subclavian veins, right before it goes into the superior vena cava. So up here. And this is one reason why if you have cancer of your lymph nodes, it will then spread quite quickly, because the lymph will be picked up the lymph will pick up the cancer. The lymph then dumps it into the circulatory system, and it's quickly spread all over the body. Good. The thymus is the gland on the top of the heart. We'll look at, this is where T cells get the education. We'll look at it a little later. Bone marrow, we already talked about. Bone marrow is the site of blood cell reproduction or production. And when we talk about lymphocytes, those are a specialized white blood cell. So the lymphocytes come from the bone marrow. Good. And the spleen is a tissue, an organ sort of tucked near your back. And the spleen is important because the spleen will filter your blood and clean out any invaders in your blood. The spleen is also a site where a lot of lymphocytes are stored. So the lymphocytes are ready to fight any disease when they're ready. So, and then we talk about the tonsils, which is a secondary one, and the lymph nodes. So those are a bit, if you look at this lymphatic video, it's a good one to explain it in a little more detail, especially in terms of what blind-ended means. Okay? Because the textbook, I know, like I say, it's a good textbook for free, but it's not my favorite textbook. Okay, we talked about the lymph being the fluid of the lymphatic system. The lymphocytes are the cells of the lymphatic system, and they're a specialized type of bone marrow. So if you remember, it's in the red bone marrow inside the bones where lymphatic cells are first made. Now, there's sort of two groups. One group will go to the thymus, and they become the T cells. And the T cells then go on to be cytotoxic T, helper T, memory Ts. And the others stay in the bone marrow, and those that stay into the bone marrow will go and become B cells. You don't need to know all the detail about the thymus, but it's a cool looking gland. Okay? Good. Spleen, here's our detail on the spleen. The spleen is the second largest lymphoid organ, and it harbors lymphocytes, and it filters the lymph, but it also filters the blood. Very important. Now, the thing about the spleen is it's kind of got a spongy type of appearance, and as the blood goes through, it will give those red blood cells a little bit of a squeeze, and if there is any problem in them, they will be broken down and get caught. So there is white blood cells there to help clean up and recycle any red blood cells that are damaged. Okay? In the spleen, we talk about red pulp, which is where the red blood cells are, and the white pulp, which is where the white blood cells are. Okay, lymph nodes. Notice that lymph node sort of looks like my stuffy. It's got a blob with a bunch of appendages coming off. And they go in. They will be filtered in this. Don't worry about all these terms of the lymph node. Just understand that the lymph node is a small organized collection of tissue. The fluid comes in, it gets filtered, and it leaves. Also, the lymph node is the site where lymphocytes hang out. So all these red blood cells hang out there until they're ready to be activated, which is very important because you want them ready to go, but you don't want them activated until they're ready to be activated. So they're hanging out in the lymph nodes. And this is just a cool diagram. Lymph nodes there's over 500 of them, and they're labeled based on their location. So don't worry about this, but it does look cool. Good. So that is the parts of the lymphatic system. Go back to the summary table in the note sheet. You'll see that we talked about each one of them. We just talked briefly about the tonsils. The tonsils are located in the back of the throat, which is a beautiful area because if you're breathing through your mouth, you'll get infection in there. And the tonsils contain lymphocytes ready to fight when the fight's ready to be engaged into. When the pathogens are there. Good. And that is enough on the lymphatic system. We're going to focus a little more on the lymphocytes in a bit. Oh, yeah, we'll focus on the lymphocytes when we talk about the immune system. Good.